Hey everybody, it's Chuck Lipstra at Michigan Agri-Business. We're going to try something new today. We invited our one of our colleagues at the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, Brian Verhougstrate, to join me to give you all a few updates about the work happening at Triple PM, Pesticide and Plant Pest Management division of the department, and some of the work that Brian and the team over there are doing. And I thought I would just kick off by saying thank you to Brian for being with us. The whole impetus for this discussion came from one of our pesticide committee meetings. So for those that don't know, MABA has a number of policy committees that meet periodically to talk about what's happening out there in the industry. I rely on our committee members to make sure we know what we need to be focused on and working on. We have a pesticide committee. And as long as I've been doing this job, Brian or one of his colleagues has been kind enough to join our pesticide committee calls and give updates from the department. Now, recently we had one of these meetings and Brian provided a number of what I thought were just really useful updates for the broader industry. Now, if you're not on the pesticide committee, you would not have heard these updates. And so I thought maybe we'd bring Brian in and just give folks a little bit of a sense of what he's working on, what the department's working on, affecting applicators and those in the pesticide industry, and share a few updates that and different resources that they've put out here in the last few months as well. But I might ask Brian, before we get into that, some people that are watching this or listening to it might not actually have met you before or interacted. And I thought maybe I'd just ask you to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your career pathway into the department and what you do today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it. And thanks so much for hosting this because I think this is, we're very excited to share some of the stuff we're doing in the pesticide program. So I'm very happy to tell our story to your members. So yeah, I've been with the department now in the pesticide and plant pest management division for a little over 20 years. I started out as a field inspector and then kind of worked my way through some programs, including the feed program at one point. But I would say I think it's been about 15 years now. I have been in the pesticide section in different roles. I've done pesticide registration program and certification program. And then about 5 years ago, I took on my current role as the pesticide section manager. I just want to say we have a great team. Like this is one of the best teams, probably the best team I've ever worked with. And we're doing some really good stuff that I'd like to share with you and your members today.
Well, I appreciate that. And I sort of alluded to this at the top, but folks should know that at the association, we enjoy a really strong two-way working relationship with Brian and his team. As the regulated community, we think it's important to keep a close points of contact and consistent communication between industry and the department. And Brian knows this. There have been a number of times where either Brian will see an issue out there and reach out to us proactively, or vice versa. A few of you out there in the membership will reach out with questions or concerns or issues that we need to work on. And we always find that Brian and the MDARD team over there working on the pesticide issues have got a listening ear. So we're able to solve quite a few challenges and issues together. But Brian, you talked about at Pesticide Committee just some of the overall priorities there in your section. Can you kind of walk us through those focus areas?
Yeah. So we have a lot going on. We're working on new things every day, but there's three things that I think your members might be most interested in, and kind of the top three priorities we're focusing right now, overarching priorities. So I would put them into three buckets, and I'll kind of go through each bucket in a little bit more detail after I initially go through them. So I would say three buckets: compliance assistance, stakeholder service, and regulatory or program uniformity. And these are all, they're related, right? Those if this was a Venn diagram, each one of those buckets would sort of cross into the other one because some things you do in one area are going to help another area. So, I'll go through and some of these in detail and give a little bit of examples of stuff we're working on. So, compliance assistance, right? At the end of the day, like like I think probably every other regulatory agency, compliance assistance is our best tool. It's the best use of our resources. Um, you know, 90% of folks that we regulate, they want to do the right thing, right? We exist for the 10% that maybe don't want to play by the rules, but the vast majority want to play by the rules. Um, and to do that, I think it's important for us to explain what the rules are in plain English and provide as many resources as possible to help folks help themselves. I think MDARD's, our culture is one of compliance assistance. Like we've done compliance assistance, has been one of our things that we've done historically in the department. One area that I think we can do better in, though, is compliance assistance before the inspection, right? So we've been good about showing up, walking folks through when we're doing an inspection or investigation of, things that need to be fixed. But what we're really focusing now is solving those problems before we get there, right? Like giving all the resources we can to make it as easy as possible for our regulated stakeholders to comply. Some things, I can think that have either been developed or will be developing is compliance assistance materials like how to comply manuals, clear policy and interpretation guidance, checklist of, when we come out, this is the sort of stuff we're looking for. There's no reason that those need to be a secret. If folks know what they are, 90% of them are going to want to make sure they're in compliance. So
Sure.
There's that. There's also the website. We just finished a major overhaul on our website. It's pretty nice now, very nice, I should say. The old website was not a useful tool. The new one, we've actually gotten a couple compliments about the new website, which is huge, right? Government compliments on a nice website. So we appreciate that and look for more improvements in the future. And then the other thing is just to help compliance assistant is better communication. Something like doing this talk here. It's our listserv. We have some listserv, which I'll talk about later, that folks can sign up for. So when we identify an issue or we need to communicate something to our regulated stakeholders, we have a direct line to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I tell you what, here's one of the great examples that I use that I think it was last year or the year before. I would call it a success story. Is we noticed that some of our RUP dealers, there was some unauthorized sales. So unauthorized sales to uncertified applicators. And so we put out on our listserv, hey, we're seeing this issue. Double check that you're not selling to, uncertified applicators. By the way, here's a list of sort of currently certified applicators. And I think that was a real success story because, at the end of the day, I heard that, some of the dealers had changed their policy because now they know. So I think that was one of our success stories. And so we're hoping to just do more of that in the future. Moving on to like the next bucket, if you will, that we're focusing on, it's service to our stakeholders, right? Like, I guess just so we're all on the same page, at the end of the day, our stakeholders, the pesticide program, our stakeholders are the 10 million people in Michigan, right? But within that set of stakeholders is our regulated stakeholders. And so, they're very important. Obviously, if we want to fulfill our mission of protecting human health and the environment, we need to make sure our regulated stakeholders are doing what they can to comply. Because if they're complying, then we should be meeting our mission. And so we're doing a variety of things in this space. But at the end of the day, we're really trying to do things as efficient as possible and prioritizing everything we do. Basically, we're trying to make the most out of our limited resources. Sure. And so that's what we're focused on. I bring up the website, right? Like we knew that we were getting a lot of phone calls and hearing a lot of frustration out there because people couldn't get the information they wanted. We fielded a lot of phone calls about how many credits do I have? Am I currently certified? Which business can I hire? So we're working hard to put some of those lists, make them public so people can help themselves, and our stakeholders can find the information they're looking for. And at the end of the day, that's efficiency for us. Like it doesn't require a person to answer that call and take them away from something else. And honestly, I think most people would rather just go to a website and get the information than have to call and try to track somebody down. So that's one of the things we're working on. We're making we're improving our partnership and really supporting the Michigan State University's pesticide safety education program. This is the program that, trains applicators. That's their role, is to train applicators. MDARD's role, the pesticide program's role, is to regulate. MSU's pesticide safety education program is to educate. And so, they're the ones that produce the manuals that folks study for to take the exam. And we're helping them rebuild their program so that they can provide the training resources to applicators that they deserve and need, quite frankly. So that's one way we're helping. I mentioned the listserv, that helps us get communication out, solve problems before they become problems. At the end of the day, that's more efficient for us. We just closed about 9 days ago now, I think. We had some stakeholder surveys out there, one for applicator businesses and one for certified applicators. And we got pretty good response from that. We're still going through the responses. But what we want to know is, what are the barriers that you face as a regulated entity or a regulated person? And, we have to know what those are. And then hopefully we can solve them. I'm not sure we can solve everything, but if we can solve some of them, I think that's huge. And again, it goes back to making it as easy as possible to comply. So that's sort of stakeholder service. That's some of the things we're working on there. And then,
Brian, if I
yeah,
can interrupt you briefly, just to say,
sure.
a number of these things, you just mentioned a number of new resources and links that are available for folks. And what we're going to do is put those on a page. I know it's on your new Triple PM website. We'll put a page up on myagbiz.org that takes folks directly to that new website, and then also some of the resources you're talking about. And I have to go back briefly and just say thank you for all the work you all do with compliance assistance. I completely agree with what you laid out in terms of being proactive and the effort there. But, we know from our ag retail members in particular, they want to work in a rules-based system. And when folks aren't following the rules, whether they're choosing not to, or often because they may not fully understand the nuances of those, we want those corrected because that helps everybody.
Right.
It comes back to a matter of fairness for all the businesses that work so hard and invest to make sure they're in compliance and following the rules. So I appreciate all the work and collaboration you all have had on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'll make sure my team hears that. That's actually a perfect segue into my last bucket, which is program uniformity, or regulatory uniformity. This one is all about how, we want to make sure that we're treating all our regulated stakeholders the same, right? Like I know that it's a frustration in our for our regulated stakeholders when they hear that one inspector is treating a different firm, perhaps in their same business, a different branch is being treated differently or got a different answer than they got from a different inspector, or that enforcement was handled different. We don't want that. We want consistency, right? So that, like you said, you can depend on these regulations and how we're implementing them, that they're fair and nobody's being treated any different. I guess I kind of say what we want it to be like is like a fast food restaurant, right? Like you may not, you know what you're getting, right? You walk into any of those fast food restaurants throughout the country, you know what you're going to get. Now, you may not always like it, but you know what you're going to get. So, you know what to expect. So that's kind of an analogy of what we're shooting for. Here's some of the things we're working on, and I'll kind of explain how they all kind of tied together. So one of the big things is ensuring that our staff is highly trained. We just brought on 4 new staff, field inspectors. I think it's been 3 weeks now. and they were about to go through the most robust training program this program has ever seen. And that's a good
That's
thing
great to
because
hear.
yeah, it is. It's super important. We realized one of our inefficiencies was that we did not always have adequate training for staff. And that leads to inconsistent regulation. It leads to inefficiencies in the inspector not feeling comfortable in what they're doing. Um, we are remedying that by ensuring we have a huge plan laid out for them as to all the curriculum they're going to go through, not only now, but for the rest of their careers. So that's a big win for us. Our team really worked hard to pull that together, and we purposely waited to hire new inspectors until that was in place to make sure we could get off on the right foot. We had a huge focus this last winter on developing clear policies and procedures internally that our inspectors can follow, that our team can follow, that we can share with our regulated stakeholders, right? Again, it's not a secret. What we do is not a secret. And so we should be sharing that information freely. But that was also one of the things we heard is our procedures were sometimes out of date. Things move so fast. And so now we have a much better, we're in a much better place
Sure.
with clear procedures. And that's going to help with the regulatory consistency. And then of course, you throw in there program uniformity, compliance assistance material, right? If firms know how to be in compliance and we give them the resources to do that, inevitably they will help make sure that they are in compliance themselves. That makes our job easier. And then lastly, one of the big changes we had about a year ago was we spun off our enforcement program, which was sort of housed in the regions. So we had 4 regions at the time, and each one sort of dealt with enforcement on their own. We now moved that into a compliance assurance unit. I'm stumbling on what exactly we call that now. I think it's enforcement and compliance assurance unit is what we call it. And basically, you have one team that will review inspection and investigation reports, and that's going to ensure consistency, right? You have a smaller number of people looking at the state. So that's a big move for us, much more efficient. It allowed us to do some of the things I just mentioned. So those are the 3 big buckets that we're really focusing on. We've been focusing on for about the last year, and I suspect for at least the next year, that's what we'll be focusing on until we get to the point where we're happy, and then it'll just be continuous improvement of that process. So.
Well, again, I heard from members of ours after your update for our pesticide committee, the appreciation for the strategic focus and the proactive focus on those 3 things. For the benefit of our MABA members who might not know, we over here try to find ways, and Brian's been great about thinking of ways to involve us on these things. For example, I think the first time ever, I had a chance to go over late last year and speak to all MDARD inspectors at their annual or semi-annual training, just to, again, continue to build and strengthen those lines of communication. I really appreciated that. And there's been great feedback from some of our members as Brian's visited with our pesticide committee on, what would be useful. I think the survey that many of you likely completed will be helpful for the department. I'm glad they did it because, again, it gives, a real world insight into how they can position some of these things going forward. But just so you all know, as MDARD and Brian and the whole team over there think about how to consistently improve, just like we do, just like you all do in your businesses, we're trying to be good partners and communicate our industry's needs up the chain as well. So I appreciate you outlining those buckets, Brian. And I think one of the other things I wanted to just touch on briefly, as you think about big issues that face the department, or the pesticide section in particular, your inspectors, the staff, what comes to mind as 1 or 2 big issues that you're tracking right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. The one that immediately comes to mind is the endangered species stuff,
Yep.
ESA, that EPA is rolling out. That is That is one of the biggest things that I can think of. I've heard my colleagues across the country say this could be the biggest thing in 40 years. It's a big change. It's a necessary change, but it's big. We are following that very closely. Our registration manager, Kevin Kern, is actually on a national committee. So he's actually leading a national committee that works with APCO and EPA to help solve some of the barriers of implementing that program. What I would say at the end of the day is, there's still a lot of unknowns with this, how this is going to roll out endangered species implementation, but it is coming. And one thing that I am certain of is applicators should become comfortable using Bulletins Live 2. That is going to appear on nearly every label, I think, in the future. There's a few out there right now. So that would be my biggest message right now is we're following it. We'll share as much information as we can when we know it. But in preparation, get comfortable with Bulletins Live 2. Explore it so that when it is here, you folks know how to use it.
I would say, first of all, thank you for flagging that for our folks and mentioning ESA. I know everybody's likely at some level tracking that issue. I think it's appropriate to share with everyone in our membership that here, even in the last couple of weeks, we, along with farm organizations and others in the industry, have had a chance to convene and think about what education will be beneficial for the entire industry. Brian and MDARD have been kind enough to be part of that, and staff from EPA and others. So look forward to having as much proactive communication as we can. But I also want to say, for the benefit of our members, when we think about roles and responsibilities here, one of the things that MDARD does really well on pesticide issues in the state of Michigan, in my opinion, is works very closely with the EPA so that our industry has some certainty. Michigan does not have a reputation for going out beyond what EPA has done on a variety of issues, and stays very closely coordinated with the EPA, which is great news if you're an applicator or anybody involved in the pesticide chain. But Brian, at the end of the day, Brian's work and MDARD's work is to implement law and regulation. Our role is to advocate as well. So we'll communicate, we'll help educate, but understand that we're working with our national partners, national associations, to make sure that your voice is heard on some of the uncertainty that remains around ESA. And I know the farm organizations at both the state and national levels are doing the same thing. So understand that we continue to work with our national groups on advocacy on what works, what is causing confusion and concern out there. That will continue. What we continue to ask of MDARD, and frankly, what MDARD has established for years, a solid record of doing, is when there are federal rules, that the state work closely with the EPA to provide all of you in our membership and growers with certainty about how pesticide products will be overseen and regulated in the state of Michigan. And I do appreciate that Brian, you and MDARD have maintained that close working relationship with the EPA, with all of us. But I did want to make the point here that we're going to work hard on education, but understand that from a MABA perspective and from our national industry partners perspective, we continue to work hard to educate and advocate before the EPA on this issue as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate you filling that in, because that is kind of what we're seeing at the national level right now, and what EPA is hearing is, okay, now we got a general sense of where EPA wants to go with this. First and foremost, there's a ton of communication and education that needs to happen.
Agreed.
And that EPA is hearing that, and they're getting it. And so that's a good thing. All right, good. Well, thanks. I guess the other thing that I would just mention, another sort of high level thing on our radar, is the update of our certification and training plan here at the department. So for those of you who don't know, through a cooperative agreement with EPA, and part of that is an implementation plan we have with, basically every other state has this as well. We regulate pesticides because EPA allows us to. They're the state or the federal lead agency in pesticide regulation. They pass that down to us through primacy, and we do that through a cooperative agreement and through this implementation program. for the first time in like since 1974 or something, we had to update that plan. It's been about 2 years now. And so, long story short, we will have to make some changes to our law, our pesticide law, and our pesticide, two of our pesticide regulations, to make sure that we still meet the same standards that EPA has set for regulating pesticides. The good news is for Michigan, there's not a whole lot of changes. We were way ahead of some other states in terms of how we regulate pesticides. This is, how we license dealers, rep dealers, how we administer exams. But long story short, I just wanted to say that, in the next couple of years, you will have an opportunity to be a part of, changing pesticide regulations, two of our regulations, and the law is just a public process. And that's what we're going to be working on. So we will have to open those things up, and make some changes. If we don't do that, then we lose our plan, and EPA, I guess, comes in and regulates pesticides, and I don't think anybody wants that. So that's just a heads up if you see some of that stuff. But again, we
I
are
think
in really good shape. Minor changes.
yeah, it's important for folks to understand on process, not something that's happening tomorrow,
No.
but a longer runway type of activity, much like with other, rule change discussions and anything affecting all of you out there. Something the department and others will involve us and farm
Yep.
groups and others and businesses well ahead of time, and we've got strong confidence that'll be a useful process. But understand that nothing coming our way next week, a period of months and possibly years. So
Yes, correct. Yep, that's absolutely correct. So just a heads up in case you see something in the future, and it's something we've been talking about for a couple years. It's just our plan finally got approved last year, so it's official now, and we know which direction we got ahead.
sure.
So I think those are the two big issues that I can think of at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess to maybe bring us full circle, you'll have folks hopefully tuning in and watching or listening to this. We hope someone will, involved either in retail or in the pesticide industry or growers themselves, but a lot of folks that are out there actively using pesticide products every day to help, produce crops in our state. With that audience in mind, what are one or two things that, the number one thing that you remind everybody when you've got their ear? Big reminders for anybody that's part of regulated industry.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I guess I'll go back to basics. I think number one, read the pesticide label. That label contains everything you need to know to safely apply that pesticides. And I know we hear it enough. Label is the law, but it's true, and it makes more sense now than ever because these labels are changing. They're becoming more complicated. As this endangered species stuff rolls out, these labels will be updated. So the same product you kept using year after year, review that label because inevitably things will change, and you don't want to be caught, not reviewing the label and maybe doing something illegal. So that would be the number one. And I guess number two would be, if you have questions, that we can help with, pesticide related questions, reach out to us. I know, Chuck, you said you were going to put some contact information and websites and stuff in the notes. But yeah, we would rather solve the problem before we show up to do an investigation or something. So if you have questions, let us know. We'll get you somebody that can help you and get that question answered.
No, I appreciate that. And we will put your contact information on there. The other thing to know, some of you know this, some of you may not. You can always reach out my way if you run into things out there that you're concerned about or you have questions about, and we will get that information to whether it's Brian or Kevin or someone up the chain at MDARD and try to, as best we can, to either solve an issue you're running into, or if we can't solve it, get you some sort of information or an answer as to why things are the way they are. To kind of bring us back to what we talked about at the beginning, Brian and I touch base very frequently, even sometimes when there's not a lot going on, just to make sure we are up to speed on what the other one is doing on pesticide issues. And what that leads us to be able to do, working together, is again, when Brian sees something or starts hearing about things out there that might be of concern for us, or vice versa, if we have members that are running into something that either requires some solution or they're just not sure what's going on, we're typically able to get good information from Brian and Kevin and the team very quickly. So encourage you all as you run into things. Don't assume if you have a challenge with the department or with a regulation or law that there's nothing you can do. Feel free to call, and but we together, and I'm not taking full credit for this at MABA. This is a shared thing. We and MDARD typically are able to get some information back to folks, and we're proud of that. So, Brian, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for your engagement. Thanks for being part of our pesticide committee recently. And as you kind of went through all those updates, I thought, everybody should hear this. Anybody dealing with pesticide products in Michigan could benefit from the information. So thanks for bearing with us as we, tried out something new here. And we'll be sure to share this out widely to folks in our AgFacts newsletter, again, on our website, miagbiz.org, and our Facebook page. And if you ever have questions or if anything piqued your interest today, please reach out my way, or you can go on our website or MDARD's website to find contact information for Mr. Verhougstraete. So thanks again for doing this, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Chuck. Thank you for putting this together. This is great. It really is. We appreciate the partnership we have in the communication stream both ways. So thank you.
Likewise, sir. And hey, thanks again. And we'll get this posted ASAP.
All right. Thank you.